Good morning and welcome to another Shooting Straight with me, Voice of the Forge, as always shooting straight from the lip. Now, I know that there is another broadcaster who has a podcast who has Shooting from the Lip as his moniker, but I've been using it for a bit longer, so I'm going to keep it. Now, as you may have known, recently I haven't been posting many videos unless something has really gotten my goat. Well, today it's the Met Police, and this video is all about why the police has lost the respect it once held. I often make allusions to the fact that I was a police officer, and the fact that I am now embarrassed in many ways to say that I was a police officer because of the way in which they behave in modern times. Now, I joined the Met in the wake of the Macpherson Report in 1998, and I was in for 10 years. I left late 2007, and the rot had set in. Now, with the wake of the Macpherson Report and being called institutionally racist and everything else, I went through the police training college at Hendon, where all these talking points were being given to new recruits. And the reality, when you actually hit the street, was a vast culture shock to many people. Now, I have never been one of life's aggressors. And I found that my biggest hurdle in order to become an effective police officer was turning off my natural instinct to actually give you... The phrase I used was I wanted to give people enough rope to hang themselves. And that wasn't always appropriate, especially when you were dealing with certain offences, usually involving drink. And I had to learn to be a lot more forthright in many cases because I was seen as too passive. Now, the fact of the matter was that my way worked because I didn't rile up a situation, and I'd often have given 2 or 3 warnings before people got arrested for various things. Now, obviously that wasn't appropriate in all cases, so I had to learn the juggling act of balancing my natural proclivity with what was required of me at certain times with the job, and I managed to do that quite effectively. But that isn't why I'm talking about this today. Today, I am talking about this new hate crime video that has been put out by the Met Police, which is incredibly tone deaf, given the fact that in the wake of the lockdown for the SARS-CoV-19, which is the full name of this epidemic, lockdown, virus, whatever you want to call it, because it is genetically related to SARS. It isn't the same, but it is a severe acute respiratory syndrome, which is what SARS stands for. So it's SARS-CoV-19, and it is a coronavirus, and people have gone on about saying, oh, you can't compare it to flu, but people don't realise that influenza, the flu, just like the common cold, is a coronavirus. It's in the name. It's that family, that taxonomic group of diseases. So that's why people make the connections. However, this morning I am going to share with you a story, an anecdote, as to why the police are effectively no longer fit for purpose and why they've lost the respect of the common person. I was a probationer in, I would say this was about 1999, so I'd gone through Hendon, I'd got about 6 months on the street, I was halfway through my probation, and there was a call made by a couple of teenage girls who happened to be white in Trafalgar Square, where they had been racially abused by a black couple. Okay, I won't go into all the specifics, but basically, these two girls had been, I mean, they were teenagers. They were what, 14, 15? They were part of a bigger group, and they were, you know, the way certain girls dress when they're sort of that age. You can't say slutty because they weren't. It was summer, so they were showing a fair amount of skin, but they were covered up. They weren't walking around in a bikini. They were wearing clothes. Yeah, okay, so it was a short skirt. Who cares? But this couple of a different ethnic minority had taken it upon themselves to shout, swear, intimidate, and racially abuse, because there's no other name for it, these couple of girls, because they didn't like the way they looked. And the older sort of police officers who'd been in for a while took one look at that and went, I'm not fucking touching that with a barge pole. That's going to be a pile of shit. You're the probationer, you go deal with it. Okay. So I dealt with it. Turned up, you've got two people who are shouting, swearing, they're aggressive, and I didn't arrest for a hate crime because I knew it wouldn't fly, even back then, because the victims were the wrong ethnicity. There's just no way that you can get it past certain people that someone who is black, who is calling people disgusting names because they're white, as being racist because the victims are white. It just won't fly. The courts won't touch it, the CPS won't touch it, and even being young in service, I knew this. So what did I do? Well, I had one or two options. A breach of the peace was occurring, so I could have arrested for breach of the peace, which is a fairly broad power. But if I arrested them for breach of the peace, it'd be a slap on the wrist. I'd probably get criticised for bringing them in for breach of the peace. So I was looking at the Public Order Act. Now, there is a racially aggravated side to the Public Order Act, which I didn't use, again, trying to get people to actually prosecute this, even back then, was a no-no, because we had to be hands-off, and we had to... This was the start of the hands-off, the black and ethnic minority, or minority ethnic, crusade that has now infected the police service, root and branch, top to bottom. So I arrested them for Section 5 of the Public Order Act. Now, what Section 5 does is if someone is being abusive, aggressive, and is using their body language and demeanour to intimidate, harass, cause alarm and distress to another person, a police officer can issue a warning telling them to stop. And if they refuse to stop after you've given them the warning, then you can arrest them for Section 5. Now, the thing is with this is that the police officer has to give a proper warning, which quite often in videos you don't often see nowadays, especially when you see the made-for-TV cameras following cops around and everything else. It never shows you the proper form of arrest. It's always, if you don't stop swearing, I'll arrest you. Alright, you're nicked. Well, that's not quite how it works, although that's the way it's been interpreted by the police and by the courts. You actually have to say, look, your behaviour is unacceptable. If you carry on with this unacceptable behaviour, then you will be placed under arrest. And the behaviour doesn't have to be swearing. It can be all sorts. But obviously, if you're looking at threats of violence and more violent actions, then obviously you don't want to be arresting for Section 5, because you're then arresting for a lesser offence rather than the offence that's been committed. But I knew that I was between a rock and a hard place with this. Right, now the problem was, when I turned up, it was a couple. It was a black man and a black woman who had a child with them in a pram. And they were so obnoxious it wasn't funny. And I think I ended up giving them 2 or 3 warnings before I finally said, look, this isn't acceptable, you're going to get arrested. And of course, I had to call for backup because I was on my own. There was 2 of them, which meant that I physically couldn't arrest 2 people because I've only got 1 pair of hands, 1 set of handcuffs, 2 people. And I'd need a van to transport them from Trafalgar Square to the police station. Even though it was only a minute walk, there was no way that I could get them from where they were to the police station by foot. So I had to call for backup, had to call for a van, and of course, go into the custody suite. You've then got social services and everything else sorted out. Now, I was told that I was going to get into a lot of trouble because I'd arrested this pair. Okay, now at this moment in time, I had told them they were under arrest. I had physically removed them from the centre of Trafalgar Square, so they were on a bench. They were up against the wall at the back of Trafalgar Square, so I physically had control of the situation. They couldn't get past me, they couldn't leave, but I didn't have the ability to put hands on them, to handcuff them for my own safety, to search them. Why would I search? Well, under PACE, you have to make sure that people are safe, that they don't have anything on them that can hurt me, anything on them that they could hurt themselves with, and you've got the fact that there may be other items on them which they may not be allowed to have, which could lead to further offences. And this is exactly what happened. When they were arrested and searched, in the hood of the pram, with a bit that folds up that can come over the top of the pram, to form the plastic shield over the child, when that's pushed back, that's all wrinkled up at the top. In the folds of that hood, there was a whacking great kitchen knife. Now, straight away, that is an offence under the Criminal Justice Act, under what's known as points and blades. If I were to arrest for an offensive weapon, I would have to prove intent. Okay, and proving intent is bloody difficult to do under English law. Unless they came out in interview and said, yeah, I had it on me because I intended to use it for self-defence, you don't have a lot to stand on. Right, so, points and blades, straight away, kitchen knife, it's a done deal. It's not where it should be, you've got it on your person, it's a prohibited weapon, end of story. It doesn't matter what your intentions are, unless you've got a really good excuse, then it's not an offensive weapon. It's points and blades. And even then, there are defences for certain people. Say, for instance, you've got a Stanley knife on you and you're a carpet fitter. Well, you use Stanley knives to cut carpet tile and cut carpets. So if you've got it on you, well, why have you got it on you? Oh, I've just finished work, mate. I cut carpets. I fit carpets for a living. Well, you've got a reasonable excuse for having it on you. You've had it for work, and you're going home. Okay, that's a lawful excuse. But to have a kitchen knife, a proper kitchen knife, one of the big ones, in Trafalgar Square, hidden in the hood of your child's pram, there's no lawful excuse for having that. So that is what they were done for. They were charged for having this pointed or bladed article in a public place without a reasonable excuse, without a lawful defence. Had they not had that weapon on them, then I was told that I would have been facing severe repercussions for my career because of the way in which I'd acted. But the way in which I'd acted was to prevent a breach of the peace, to stop unlawful behaviour, which was causing people to be distressed, to be alarmed. They'd been caused anxiety. You could even argue that assault had taken place, because under English law there are two sections. You have assault and you have battery. Now, what a battery is that you have actually touched someone. But you can assault someone verbally. You don't have to. You don't have to have laid hands on someone under English law to have committed an assault. The threat of force, like "I'm gonna bash your brains in," if it's credible, if it's in a live situation, as in it's happening right there and then, and you believe that they might actually follow through with what they're saying, then that is an assault. Never mind spitting, which again is an assault. Never mind anything else, just using the words can be an assault. And this is why I have problems with certain hate crime legislation, because I'm with South Park. All crime is hate crime. Okay, there should be no distinction. If you are using words which can cause harassment, alarm and distress, there doesn't need to be this, because you're already hurting someone by causing harassment, alarm and distress. The fact that it's got this overtone of, well, you used this name and this slang and this slur, to me it's nonsensical, because you've already committed the crime. You've already done it. There doesn't need to be this extra on top of it, because you've already broken the law. But that's just the way I feel, and I've come to this over many years. I mean, we are in 2020 now, so as those of you who can do the maths, you know that I've been out 13 years and I was in for 10. But this is the point I'm trying to make, is the fact that I, as a white police officer, arrested a black couple who was racially abusing, who were swearing, who were using disgusting slurs against children who happened to be a different ethnic background to them, because they were white and the couple that were doing this were black. And had I not found a weapon, then I could have potentially lost my job, because it wasn't the done thing. Now, we're talking about 1999. Okay. 1999. And we were already approaching the hands-off approach when dealing with certain communities and certain immutable characteristics of certain groups of people. And as time has gone on, our leaders within the police service, as it is now, who have come from university, who have been fed this, I don't want to use Common Core because that's an American thing. It's more Frankfurt School of Marxism. Power plus privilege and all the rest of it. It's much more socialist and much more communist in many ways. And I can say that because it uses the language of the communist to build this intersectional framework where you've always got an oppressor and an oppressed class. It's the Frankfurt School of Marxism. That's where it all comes from. Intersectionality is pure Frankfurt School of Marxism. Right? So in 1999, I had to be careful in how I did my job as a new police officer, coming into this brave new world of policing in the wake of the Macpherson report, where the police were institutionally racist, and it was a hands-off approach if you weren't white. And as time has gone on, this rot has worked its way up to the point where now I probably wouldn't have been able to arrest that couple at all, give them any kind of sanction, because they were black. And we wonder why knife crime is spiralling out of control in London. We wonder why the police don't have the respect that they once deserved. It's because they no longer deserve it. They no longer do the job. They're more concerned with hurty feelings than actually preventing, which is their first duty. People don't realise this, but the actual first duty of police is to prevent crime. And it's only after crime has been committed are they then supposed to investigate and enforce the law. It's the first line of the police oath, is to keep the Queen's peace, to prevent crime. Anyway, this has gone on for far too long. The whole point is that a story from when I first started in the police. It was a hands-off approach then, in 1999, and as time has gone on, it's only gotten worse. And, as I say, as a new police officer, had I had not found these extra circumstances, I may have well lost my job because of my actions, which, under the law, would have been perfectly acceptable. But because of the way in which the police were expected to behave, it was, oh, no, you don't do that. No, you don't do that because that's wrong. They're the victims. You can't arrest the victims. And yet, what did the police do in Rotherham? They arrested the girls for prostitution when they were 14. Utter bollocks. It's all crap. Either we're equal under the law, or we don't have policing by consent. And I think we are coming to a point where the police experiment, as it is now, has to come to an end. The police are no longer fit for purpose. We have to stop, look, and reform massively what we expect from our police, what we expect from our citizenry, or subjects, because we're all technically subject to the Queen, we're not citizens. But we have to stop and look at what it is we want to be able to do as a society and how we want to live. And once we get out of the COVID-19 lockdown, I think we are going to be in for a rude awakening, because the police are not going to want to hand back the extra powers that they've been given. And I think we might be on a very sticky wicket. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for taking the time. I am, as always, Voice of the Forge. You can reach me on Twitter at Voice of the Forge. You can reach me on YouTube at Voice of the Forge. And if you have any comments or you want to get in touch and discuss things further, then please feel free. Thank you, and have a good day.